Good day, ladies and gentlemen, joining us from all corners of the world. My name is Bongiwe Tutu from the Africa-China Reporting Project in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I will be hosting today's Africa-China Training Forum with my colleague Cobus van Staden, the China-Africa Project's Director of Research and Analysis. Cobus, hello, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Bongiwe. Thanks so much for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Oh, great. So welcome everyone to the 17th African Investigative Journalism Conference. And this is Africa's biggest annual gathering. And this year, AIJC has expanded exceptionally, not only virtually and in person, but simultaneously from 5 African cities. So Cobus, over to you.
Thanks so much, Bongiwe. So our first speakers will be me and Eric Olander. We jointly run the China-Africa project, and we'll be introducing some kind of like notable talking points on the China-Africa space particularly. Then we'll be joined by Colin Santika, who's a senior investigative journalist at the Center for Investigative Journalism in Malawi. Tawanda Majoni, who's the national coordinator for Information for Development Trust, and then Khadija Al-Usman, who's the program officer for Anglophone West Africa for the Paradigm Initiative. So we're really thrilled to have everyone here. What we wanted to do, we realized that the China-Africa space is a very crowded one, and there's lots going on. So we wanted to try and kind of just provide a little bit of focus to give you some of the biggest stories that we're looking at this year. So I'm going to be looking at two: the FOCAC Summit and new data on lending, and then I'm going to hand over to Eric for two related and very interesting issues in extractives, looking at cobalt and also looking at coal. So this year, like if you're already like feeling a little bit lost when I just like throw out acronyms like FOCAC, like the FOCAC stands for the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. It's the big 3-yearly summit that brings together leaders from all over the African continent and Chinese leaders. So I don't want to kind of take up too much of time. I'm handing over to Eric now, and he'll give you two kind of like big like new kind of emerging dynamics that we're seeing in the extractive space, in the China-Africa extractive space.
Sure. Thanks, Cobus, and great to be back at the AIJC. So first, I think just to follow up on Cobus was talking about, again, there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation and disinformation in the China-Africa space, in African coverage of China. Much of it is very poorly informed. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make when covering China is, and this is a common problem across Africa, is that they will look at the Chinese as just an extension or a different form of the US, of Americans and Europeans. And it's really important that you understand that the Chinese are very, very different than the US and the Europeans. They're not playing by the same rules at all. And so understanding where they're coming from is actually very important. And then the second part is to understand, where does Africa fit within China's broader priorities? And when we look at Africa's role in the world for the Chinese, it's actually the least important trading region of all regions in the world for the Chinese. So what do I mean by that? I mean the fact that when we look at China is a $4.5 trillion trading power. Every year it does about $4.5 trillion in trade. It is the largest trading country in the world. Last year, Africa as a group did $187 billion of trade with China. And most of that trade is concentrated in just 10 countries that are largely the extractive countries. And so when we look at Africa, the continent, it looks good. 187 billion is big for Africa, but for China at 4.5 trillion, it's actually the least of all the different regions. In fact, China does about double the trade with South America. It does 240 billion with the Middle East. And here in Southeast Asia, where I'm at, it's $1.2 trillion. The point here I'm trying to make is that most of what China buys from Africa, which is oil, mineral, and timber, the vast majority of that it can buy elsewhere on the Belt and Road today. That was not the case 20 years ago when China first came to Africa, but today it is. There's very little that is unique to Africa that the Chinese can't buy somewhere else. However, There is one product that they need more than anything right now, and that is cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the most important geopolitical relationship that China has in Africa today, it's not in South Africa, it's not Nigeria, it's not Ethiopia, it's not Djibouti, it is Congo. And so the events that have been unfolding in the DRC over the past 6 to 9 months are the most fascinating and interesting to see how the Chinese are making huge investments into the Congolese mining space. And at the same time, the Congolese government is pushing back very hard to renegotiate the contracts and to try and get a better deal out of the Chinese. At the end of the day, there is not a single expert out there that we've spoken to who doesn't believe that the Chinese will be the dominant player in the Congolese mining sector, and the Tshisekedi government is going to be a lot richer at the end of this process. The fundamentals will not change, but there is a very fascinating, delicate dance that is going on right now. So I invite you to focus attention on what the Chinese are doing in the DRC. Conversely, there's been a very big shift just in the past couple of weeks. It affects our friends in Zimbabwe and South Africa the most, which is that Chinese President Xi Jinping announced that China will cease building coal-fired power plants and will no longer fund coal-fired power plants. This is particularly devastating for Zimbabwe, where they had a $3 billion commitment to fund the Senghua power plant. Also, the Hwange power plant was also going to be what's mostly done. It's about 80%, 90% done, but it means that future investment in coal in Zimbabwe will not happen. There are about 5 major Chinese power plants that were going to be developed by the Chinese worth billions of dollars. And the key question here is that if it's not coal, something that's abundant in many African countries, from Botswana to Zimbabwe and elsewhere, will the Chinese then come through with sustainable funding for other new, cleaner development and cleaner energy sources? We don't know. And this is one of the areas where, again, where we have to see improved civil society pressure on African leaders to start negotiating better deals with the Chinese in order to get these sustainable types of energy and resources and a more sustainable trade. It does not look like that African leaders are doing a very good job in many cases of negotiating the contracts. And one of the key things when we talk about the loan deals that Cobus talked about is too often in the coverage, Africans, and this is African coverage I'm talking about, African media portrays African countries as somehow being victimized by the Chinese. The Chinese are doing this to us. And the key question here is, there is absolutely nothing stopping any one of the parliaments in Africa from voting laws and creating laws that say all loan contracts with every foreign power must be made public and must be scrutinized. Right now, it is the Kenyan Attorney General who is fighting against the release of the standard gauge railway contract. It's not the Chinese. So when we look at these deals, Africans are not the victims here. And that's a very important part of the narrative that is missing here. Africans have agency. African governments are complicit in this. African civil society has a voice in this. And too often the narrative is simply boiled down to, well, here we go again, another foreigner is taking advantage of us. And so the last point that I'll make is that there is absolutely nobody putting a gun to any African leader's head to sign these loan deals with the Chinese. This is not colonialism 2.0. This is not resources and laws and things being forcibly extracted from Africa the way it was in the past. So again, on the news coverage of it, more accountability for African governments and what are they doing? You as African taxpayers have a right to know where your money is going and what the terms of those contracts are, because you are going to be paying for it, your children are going to be paying for it, and your grandchildren are going to be paying for it. And that is missing from too much of the coverage. I'll leave my comments there so there's time for Q&A.
I'm going to be presenting the hybrid training strategy in the era of COVID-19 adopted by the Africa-China Reporting Project. And just before I go straight into it, I'm just going to give a brief introduction of the project. So we're based at the Center for Journalism at the University of Witwatersrand, and the project was established in 2009, and that was coincidentally the same year that China surpassed the United States as Africa's largest trading partner. And there existed a gap in knowledge and information on Africa-China relations. So one thing that doesn't need much introduction is the COVID-19 pandemic, and the crisis has been felt globally. And I think before the end of 2019, no one would have ever imagined a global virus disrupting the way of life and work. So that is the Africa-China Reporting Project's hybrid training strategy. It is to maximize online and offline training into a coherent whole to navigate the restrictions of the COVID-19 era and to still provide facilitation and capacity building to journalists. So what was important and most immediate is the pandemic itself and the reporting around it, so as not to only support journalists with reporting grants, but to also inform society and unpack how African communities are being affected by the pandemic. And these are also some of the examples of publications which came from the Public Health Reporting Grant Series, projects, webinars that we've hosted ever since the pandemic. So this was the first for the project because we've never held webinars before, but we swiftly learned the technology and we were able to host 12 webinars from this year. So these are the some examples of our webinars that we held. Then the project developed a training website which is dedicated to journalists and resources and provides journalists and researchers and provides free resources for everyone who wants to get some information or resources on how to report on Africa-China relations. Then we held collaborations for training workshops, and I think this was more impactful. So the workshops were highly informative and built the capacity of the journalists who participated and also presented a networking opportunity for them. Then we also collaborated with independent investigative units, and this was a new approach apart from awarding individual reporting grants, but to also award investigative units for a more impactful reporting and to support and enhance and sustain the important and the brave work that is done by investigative units in Africa.
We had a workshop in Malawi on Africa-China relations in general, and then Africa-China relations in particular focusing on Malawi. I think we had the local experts from a local university that tackled that issue. We had 10 local journalists, and these journalists were selected, one, on the basis of the strength of their news idea, two, the type of media, and three, jurisdiction, because some are coming from community radios, national TVs, national newspapers.
So what we did is after doing the partnership with ACRP, we mobilized journalists to participate in this particular training intervention. And we had originally targeted 10 journalists, but then we ended up with 13 journalists.
So I'm here to talk about the tools and training from our workshop at Abuja, Nigeria. But my experience and work was a bit different from that of the other presenters. And I would tell you why. So I wanted to give a background on what we do, what was taught, what were the tools, what were the skills, and a summary. So at Paradigm Initiative, what we do is, our motto basically is to connect underserved young Africans with digital opportunities and ensure a protection of their rights.
So the question on WOVA is, what major debacle can debar or disrupt Africa-China relationship, and particularly the business relationship? So yeah, kind of like I would like to kind of throw that open to our speakers. Do you think there is such a kind of debacle, that a single thing that can happen that would disrupt the relationship?
Eric can maybe answer that.
the relationship is so varied and so complex and so multifaceted that it will be very difficult for any single thing. We've seen a lot of challenges in the past year to year and a half in the China-Africa relationship, from the outbreak of discrimination against Africans and African Americans in Guangzhou in April 2020, which led to countless offensive videos on social media, to the rash of videos that we've seen of the maltreatment of African workers at the hands of Chinese managers. Again, that causes a lot of uproar. One of the challenges we face in the China-Africa relationship is that there's a huge gap between African civil society and the African governing elites. So what outrages African civil society is then insulated by African governing elites who want to protect that relationship. And so long as there's such a big division between the people and their politicians, it's going to be very difficult to see how this relationship gets derailed. One other very quick point is that the economic relationship, as I mentioned, is becoming less important going forward. Africa's value to China is not with the minerals and the oil and the timber that it can buy pretty much anywhere else. It's with the power of African votes that in supporting China's positions at the UN, at the World Health Organization, at the IMF, against the United States. So it's becoming a political relationship and not an economic relationship, and that changes the dynamic quite a bit.
So, thank you. The next question is to Khadija, and the person asks, how do you find working in different regions of Nigeria? Do you have more or less success in your advocacy in, say, northern Nigeria versus southern Nigeria?
Thank you very much. That's a great question. So thankfully, my team is very wide. We have team members in every region in Nigeria. We have team members in the South, Northwest, North Central, Southwest. We don't have a team in the Northeast, and then of course in other regions outside of Nigeria. So of course the teams in those regions face different problems in terms of advocacy. A lot of the teams there focus on digital inclusion mostly. I lead the digital rights team here, but a lot of the teams down there focus on digital inclusion. And what we have found is, again, the problems could be very different. So if you go to a state in the Northwest, for instance, and you're trying to tell them, hey, you need to leverage on technology to get ahead in life, some people might decide to send their sons and not their daughters, and there's the whole debacle on whether or not the women need this technology, and that might not be the case somewhere in another region. Another region would be more concerned with what financial gain are you going to give me for this? Am I going to get some money for doing this? So it really depends on the region, but thankfully, we have people from those regions who understand the context and work with the people on that. So it's not just me, it's a wide range of people, and we come back and rub minds and find ways to move towards the obstacles that we have found. But so far, so good. I think we're doing a good job.
Thanks, Khadija. The next question is to Collins. How do you deal with political issues in developmental journalism? For example, if you are unable to investigate hidden details about loans or deals with China that can cause great impacts on people's lives in Malawi, and does it feel that there is a part of the story missing? Like, do you find it harder to, for example, I'm just extrapolating from the question, do you find it harder to report on the political impacts, or to have to report on issues that would have a lot of political fallout in the country than ones that are purely economic?
Yeah, thanks for the question. But maybe I need to emphasize that what we emphasize in the workshop is that we are not doing public relations journalism. We are doing investigative journalism, focusing on development journalism. We are saying, okay, write anything, right? It's for the readers to judge. We are not saying this one won't write, this won't write. We are going to tackle everything that we find. as long as it hinges on development journalism. We are not doing PR for the Africa-China relations. No, we are not doing it.
We have another minute or so left. So if there's any further questions, please feel free to post it on Zoom or on Rover.
Maybe I can add that what we're teaching our journalists is investigative journalism proper. I think in Malawi, we have very few investigative people who do real investigative journalism. So we're saying follow a systematic approach, find the story, and then the story will speak for itself. That's what we're saying.
I think maybe we can just direct a question to Tawanda. Is Tawanda there? If you can just briefly lay out how are relations between Zimbabwe and China, and why is it important to report on this relationship? What have you found? What have your journalists experienced in Zimbabwe reporting on China, Africa, China, Zimbabwe related issues?
You might recall that Zimbabwe, or rather the Zimbabwean government, the ruling government, adopted what it calls the Look East policy at the turn of the millennium. That's about around the year 2000. And the reason why they did that was because Zimbabwe was facing increasing isolation from especially the West, and therefore they turned to Beijing, they turned to China as an all-weather friend. So for the ruling elite in Zimbabwe, China is dependable, is ever dependable, is ever reliable, is what in the global matrix, in the global order, is going to give them some leverage in world political dynamics. And then you see also that between Beijing and Harare, I think Eric did say that, and I did like the point when he says that China is increasingly looking at politicizing its relations with Africa, and then the same is happening with Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe becomes some kind of an outpost, some kind of a buffer for China against the United States, especially, but maybe other Western countries. So that's how useful Zimbabwe is to China. But then, of course, the Zimbabwean elite is also saying that China becomes useful, because you remember that at one time Zimbabwe almost like faced a legitimate UN sanctions, but China vetoed that. And so the ruling elite in Zimbabwe is very, very conscious of that. So therefore, this is the political matters that they. So you're looking at the commercial relationship, which is becoming more and more intricate, especially between the ruling elite, local, and China and Chinese companies. And then at the political level, you also you should see this intricacy as well.